Alright people, over the years I've spent countless hours clicking and scrolling through BoxRec.com. I've found plenty of fantastic names along the way, incredible numbers, and some fascinating backstories. And I'm always on the lookout for boxers with identical win-loss records, like Johnny Melfa for instance. 13 wins, 10 by knockout, 13 losses, 10 by knockout. What are the odds of that? Johnny and guitarist Terry Elcock founded the acclaimed punk band D-Mob. Johnny played drums. His passion for boxing took over and he worked his way up the British rankings to earn a shot at the British middleweight title against the legendary Harold Bomber Graham. Bomber stopped Johnny on his feet in the 5th round. No shame there. How about this for a name? Golf Ball Bernard. Active in the early 1930s. Cat Eye, aka Tacoma Eclipse. Active in 1910. Take a look at them hands. We could never know how many fights the likes of Golf Ball Bernard and Cat Eye actually had. To quote boxing historian Miles Templeton, records of that era are vastly incomplete, unquote. A hungry man could fight anything up to 5 times a day back then. That's the way it was. Hungry men, scrapping in 6-ounce horsehair gloves. Hungry for food, desperate for shelter. If a man happened to be on the run from the law, he'd be sure to use a different name state to state. Who knows, Cat Eye may have only been Cat Eye for these 2 fights. Blue Nosed Parent, out of Lewiston, Maine, active through the 1920s and early 30s, evidently a bit of a banger. Boot Black Brown, Florida, late 1920s. Egghead Ratty, straight out of Memphis, active from 1913 to 1918. Haymaker Hopper, also out of Memphis, active in the early 1920s. Man o' War, South Carolina, 1925. Punch Crow, from St George's, he made his debut in 1909. St George's, East London, the Wapping area, was a seriously rough manor back then. Snowball Beep Bop Killer, identical win-loss digits, Spartanburg, South Carolina in the 1950s. Spark Plug Boyd, alias Joseph Boyd, also known as Woodward W. Tending. I clicked on his profile photo and unearthed a gem of a history lesson. Woodward W. Tending was born on June the 19th, 1906 in Kansas City. He developed into something of a wild child, big and strong for his age. After a couple of scrapes with the law, he ended up in a reform school. He was paroled from there into the custody of a local farmer. Aged just 12, Tending was put to work in cornfields under the blazing Kansas sun. Despite his young years, he earned himself a reputation as a hard worker who never complained. He eventually escaped the farm and made his way to Seattle and America's Pacific Northwest, where he found work in the logging industry. He left his mother, father, brothers and sisters behind and would never see any of them again. Woodward W. Tending wasn't the brightest of young men, but he was amicable and knew the value of a hard day's graft. In the rough and tumble world of Pacific rainforest logging, he held his own. On becoming dissatisfied with his $2 a week pay packet, he visited a boxing gym with a view to making some real money. The trainers threw him into a trial sparring session. They liked what they saw, but didn't fancy his name. One of them came up with Spark Plug Boyd on the spot, and it stuck. On Monday 3rd of September 1923, Spark Plug Boyd made his professional debut against Walter Kid Krejci. They fought to a draw over 4 rounds at the Grand Theatre, Washington. That's not Washington DC, but Grays Harbor County. The Grays Harbor fight scene was a tough environment, and Boyd waded into the thick of it. He became known as a crowd pleaser, by all accounts not the most skillful, but game as hell. Boyd's eccentric nature often surfaced during fights. He'd wind up his punches dramatically and play to the crowd. The Seattle and Grays Harbor fight fans turned out in good number whenever Sparkplug Boyd was on the bill. On June the 19th, 1928, Boyd stepped into the ring at the American Legion Auditorium, Washington, for the first in a fateful trilogy of fights against the old bald eagle Frank Farmer, a tough-as-nails logger. The Tacoma News-Tribune had previously declared Frank Farmer to be the most popular boxer in the Pacific Northwest. Boyd and Farmer battled to a 6-round draw in that first fight. Farmer won the second a year later by unanimous decision. On March the 24th, 1930, Boyd and Farmer faced off once again. By this time, Frank Farmer was washed up and worn out. He'd been logging and fighting for 3 decades. The fight was scheduled for 6 2-minute rounds. Farmer was ahead going into the 5th. During the 5th, Boyd landed a couple of light shots to the body and a glancing tap to the face. Both men fell into a clinch. Boyd pulled himself free and Farmer smiled before falling to the canvas. The referee leapt between them and began counting, but there was no point. The Associated Press reported, toe to toe with his opponent, the smell of resin and sweat in his nostrils, the hoots and cheers of fans in his ears, and with gloves swinging, Frank Farmer died in the midst of the life he knew for a score of years. Sparkplug Boyd was arrested and jailed, but a coroner cleared him of all blame the following day. It turned out that Farmer had entered the ring with a heart condition so grievous that he'd have surely died on that day no matter what he'd been doing. BoxRec credits Frank Farmer with 125 bouts, but early 20th century Tacoma sports columnist Elliot Metcalf estimates he took part in over 400. Tacoma fight promoter George Shanklin read the final services at Farmer's funeral and closed with the words, "Goodbye, old friend. Goodbye." Sparkplug Boyd fought a further 29 times, winning only 5, with 12 draws. It must be said that of the 12 losses, only 1 came by stoppage, and that was due to a bad cut. His last known fight was on August 2nd, 1932 against Seattle's Bob Fraser. Boyd lost on points and disappeared from the scene. Years later, he turned up working in a carnival boxing booth, taking on all comers. Later still, he served in the US Army during World War II. Post-war, he returned to the Grays Harbor area, where his fortune spiraled downwards into alcoholism and homelessness. He found sanctuary among the weary and worn out on Seattle's Skid Road. Occasionally he'd clown around shadowboxing for huddled groups of downtrodden street drinkers. I'm Sparkplug Boyd. Sparkplug Boyd the fighter. Ever heard of me? The name no longer rang any bells, although some had heard the rumour that he once killed a man in a fight. In conversation, he'd sometimes attribute his late career dip in form to the Frank Farmer incident. But in an interview with a Seattle sports reporter, he admitted, "I was wore out. I didn't have it. When you're through, you're through." Woodward W. Tending was found dead in a Seattle hotel room on June 12, 1961. The cause of death was pneumonia due to chronic alcoholism. He is remembered here, and the old bald eagle Frank Farmer. 2 good men who played their part in laying the road that brought us all here. Please don't forget to click like and to subscribe to the channel, share this vid about a bit, and I'll see you for the next one. Peace.